Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nick Davis. I'm the UK Industry 4 leader here at Deloitte. Very warm welcome to everyone. Before we begin, I know many of you are facing some incredibly difficult professional and personal circumstances. I really hope that you, your colleagues, friends and family are staying safe and well during these really difficult events. As you'd expect from a business perspective, we at Deloitte are supporting many of our clients through some really exceptional challenges around supply chain disruption. And as an aside, I did want to signpost a weekly webinar run by Deloitte's chief economist here in the UK, which provides some perspectives on the challenges organisations are facing, how businesses are responding, and some thoughts on the actions that businesses can take in the current environment. And we'll share some details on that after the webinar.
Now, from a personal perspective, and talking to clients over this past week in particular, one thing is evident, which is that the manufacturing sector here in the UK and elsewhere is really playing a critical role right now in this crisis. And many of the clients I've been speaking with are supporting the urgent need for critical equipment and consumables for the healthcare frontline. And I'm personally involved with a number of leading organisations, businesses and research centres to investigate novel ways to accelerate production of all sorts of pieces of equipment and consumables for that front line as well, using techniques such as 3D printing and others. But I think for the context of the webinar today, I think this current crisis is exposing some limitations about how many businesses and government understand supply chain risk, how their manufacturing operations can be disruptive, and the need for greater agility and flexibility in manufacturing operations. We continue to see organisations and clients of ours wanting to explore and implement solutions to address some of those challenges, which brings us to the topic of today's webinar around Smart Factory. Today, we're launching the latest research paper from Deloitte around Smart Factory, and it focuses on some lessons learned from organisations at the forefront of Industry 4. So, as some of you will be aware, we were due to host this event at the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre in Sheffield, but clearly current events mean that that's on hold for right now. So I hope you do find this alternative format helpful. We'll look for future opportunities to host events at the AMRC in future. And I will say, for those who are on the phone but not getting visuals, the content we're sharing is not rich in its own right. So we will also share the PowerPoint material that we're using, but you should be able to follow all of the content we talk through in the next 45 minutes or so. Over the course of this webinar, I want to share with you some perspectives and introduce you to some of the key themes from this latest research. I would urge you to take a look at the paper because it does go deeper on some of the areas that we can't really cover in this session. And during the course of this, my colleagues Lauren and John will also dig deeper on a couple of the themes that come out as well. Just in terms of some background around the research itself, what we're sharing you with is an evolution of our initial 2017 Smart Factory study and some research that we conducted last year with MAPI, which is the Manufacturers Alliance for Productivity and Improvement. And the research that we did last year was a quantitative survey providing effectively a state of the nation around Smart Factory. So that helped us to kind of understand a clear separation in the maturity and rigor with which different businesses are engaging Industry 4. It has given us some really good insight, if you see the paper, around some of the key applications of digital that businesses are applying in their Smart Factory endeavours. And it also covers other aspects, such as the constitution of the executive and the leadership teams that are promoting and working together around Smart Factory transformations as well. And it's, an underlying stat that's probably worth drawing out from that research from 2019 is that nearly 90% of the respondents to the survey said that they expect that smart factories will be the main driver for competitiveness by 2025. Also, we saw some distinct groups emerging, and I think the question about who's at the forefront and who may be lagging, I think it is one that comes up in many of my conversations. But we identified, for example, a group of what we described as trailblazers who are well on the way to digitising not just individual plants, but also looking at how they extend that across their manufacturing network, how they connect up individual factories with each other, and the trailblazers tend to be using a whole host of different levers around digital solutions in the manufacturing environment rather than isolated point solutions as well. So building on last year's research, the paper we're launching today draws on around 40 or more interviews with executives from global manufacturers, staff in those organizations, suppliers in those organizations, all of whom have hands-on experience of successfully delivering smart factory transformation. And as you'll see indicated on the page, that spans a whole range of sectors, including consumer goods, aerospace and defense, life sciences, medtech, and others as well. So I'll just come back onto, there are two main threads in the paper. So first, and what we'll kind of dial into today is around key lessons learned from those who are successfully on this journey, essentially drawing out some of the critical success factors that leading businesses are using. The second thread that is covered in the paper that we won't go into today is what that journey is looking like. So where are businesses starting? What foundations are they building on? And then how are they sequencing their activity to scale and drive more value from their Industry 4 efforts in the factory? So let's dive right in. So the question is, what lessons learned have we kind of derived from this research? So there are two categories to this. So in reflecting the notion that transformation is only successful as the people who embrace it, there are four key lessons that have come to the fore around culture and change management. Secondly, there's a second category which are more specific to Smart Factory in its own right, and you'll see some of those on here around connectivity, the diversity of devices and equipment facing and that need to be addressed in Smart Factory transformations, and also the relationship and the harmony that's needed between the IT world and the operational technology or OT world as well. Okay, so let's just look at these each in turn. So the first of the culture and change aspects is around human-centered design. So this is really a theme from the discussions that we've had around really designing digital solutions around the user experience and how it is that various different roles within the manufacturing operations will make use of the technology that they're afforded. So this is about understanding specific pain points for specific roles and how to make those roles easier to perform and more effective and efficient. Now, the roles that our workforces enable are clearly very, very diverse roles. And what you don't want is people sifting through data and screens that they don't need. Not only is it ineffective, but it's also a significant barrier to adoption as well. And just to bring this to life a little bit, we in recent times worked with a manufacturer of physical industrial machines, think diggers, and we were using RFID-based technology to track their physical assets at the end of their production line. So after the majority of the machines were produced, there was typically some customization, some quality inspection and so on that was needed. But how the data was used for those in shipping, for example, from those involved with operations and final configuration of the product on the shop floor was significantly different. So we wanted to make sure that those users and the consumers of the data that was available to them had some very targeted technology solutions that they could use, rather than having to click through various different things not relevant to their roles as well. This idea about engaging those in the shop floor relates to the second of the topics I'm going to talk to here, which is around top-down and bottom-up engagement. So every one of our respondents referred to the need for executive buy-in, the leaders who will lead the way, they will help support the business cases that may require, in some cases, significant capital investment, but those leaders who can understand the nature of the transformation and drive value across the manufacturing network and not just within the four walls of any given factory. Clearly, the theme around clear project sponsors was critical as part of that research as well. And I think underlying some of the sometimes well understood and certainly something I've had empathy with is a degree of skepticism around the value that Smart Factory can bring. So there is an element that is referred to our respondents around seeing is believing. And that's where, through personal experience, I had some great fortune last summer to bring together a group of executives from a global medical device manufacturer. So the head of the SVP of operations, functions including procurement, finance, operations, manufacturing, and actually spent a whole week with that group to help them understand the opportunities of digitization within their manufacturing environments. We took them to the AMRC in Sheffield to give them a true look and feel and touch of what some of these technologies can enable. And we also got the opportunity to share with them experiences from other organizations. So the seeing is believing for that group, I think is hugely valuable. And I think curating the right ways of kind of engaging senior leaders around what this can bring for them, I think is critical as well. However, it's not only those leaders who need to be able to understand and embrace this change, and many don't have necessarily the good fortune of visiting other client organizations, other business organizations, and research centers like the AMRC. There is obviously a need for bottom-up engagement so that those at the front line understand the benefit, what's going to be in it for them. And again, some very useful techniques that I've seen used in this scenario is effectively taking the smart factory to the shop floor. So actually being able to run series of kind of engagement sessions with the shop floor to help them to understand how these technologies could be a benefit for them. And again, same clients as we worked with last summer. We had the good fortune of running the smart factory at some of their facilities, and the level of engagement was absolutely fantastic. We had hundreds from the shop floor come in and see what these technologies could do for them, and we found it a hugely valuable exercise for actually generating ideas from them about how they could see some of these technologies changing the way that they work each and every day. Just moving on, so the third of the change and culture topics was around the diversity of skills that are needed to make this happen. So our respondents are really cited a successful smart factory transformation means you need to combine engineering, the shop floor, quality, with actually digital skills around, for example, human-centered design, analytics, the use of data and data management tools, et cetera, and the merging of those worlds can bring tension. So the digital world of agile ways of delivery, fail-fast cultures, and so on, can be a difficult thing to address in operational critical and sometimes safety critical environments in the manufacturing shop floor. But you do need to be able to bring those skills together. This is what we're told by the respondents to our research and the interviews that we've held, because the danger is that things can otherwise be missed. So I personal experience of being in a fortunate world where the lack of understanding and joint working between IT and OT related teams can mean that critical robots, in the case that I can recall, were unfortunately disabled on the shop floor because those worlds were not working closely enough together and bringing their perspectives to bear around new digital solutions to help solve problems and deliver value. I'm going to pause there. There is a final section in relation to culture and change management, specifically in relation to ongoing support and learning. So Lauren's going to talk to us around the future of work, so the understanding about where, when, and how work gets done and by who, and some perspectives about how leaders are thinking about their future workforce as well.
Thank you very much, Nick. So just a quick introduction to kind of the role that I play in Deloitte when we're looking at this before we kind of move on into the detail. So my role is basically looking at some of these insights and market trends that we're seeing across different industries, but really understanding what that means then for our clients. So drilling down into kind of that so what piece. So looking at the data, looking at the insights, but understanding how organizations can respond, but also proactively think about the future of their work and their workforce. If we move on to the next slide, when we talk about future of work, what generally comes to people's minds is kind of robotics and this idea that kind of robots are coming to take over everyone's jobs. We don't have that view at Deloitte. We don't see it as the robot apocalypse, but what we do see is an opportunity for individuals to continuously develop capabilities, to drive our own careers, and thinking about what our interests are and adopt new ways of working that really fit with our values, drivers, and lifestyle. So it's all about what does technology do to enable the workforce. So thinking about those advances and that exponential growth in technology, how that can generate efficiencies for organizations. But once you start to think about the impact that has on the workforce and start to rethink and redesign what that workforce do, is where organizations really see that drive in value. So as I mentioned, we think about this through kind of two lenses. The first is around technology. So there's no denying that technology is changing in an exponential rate. And the advances we're seeing are opportunities for all organizations to really understand how to augment their workforce with this opportunity. We're seeing this growth in technology everywhere. So 1 in 3 people worldwide have a smartphone, and with 5G coming in, we're going to have faster download speeds and instant access to data and information. And that's what we're used to in our personal lives, but we need to start thinking about what that means from an organizational perspective. So that expectation of instant access, how do organizations take advantage of that from a technological perspective, but also see how that can adapt and change the way that they work. We've collected 9 times more data in the last 2 years than we have in the rest of history, and this has created the perfect opportunities for us as organizations to really understand our workforce and our customers, but also kind of how our organization is performing through productivity, through engagement, whatever it might be. And yet we are only using about 0.5% of the data that we're collecting. So there's this real gap between the opportunity there that data brings and the actual application of this in our working lives. And as I mentioned, there's no denying the ability of AI, cognitive, and robotics is increasing at speed. And that interaction between human and machine are going to become the norm. But where we look at this is a real opportunity to augment the workforce. So technology is actually creating more jobs than it's removing, making that work that the workforce do a lot more human. But it's only by rethinking what work is completed and redesigning the roles in an organization that we can really realize those efficiencies from the technology and then improve the productivity of our workforce. So really understanding what that impact is and redesigning our workforce around that opportunity gives us kind of that increase in productivity that we're currently not seeing across the different industries. So the second part of future work, as I mentioned, is all about kind of the workforce. So if you move on to the next slide, our workforce is becoming increasingly diverse, and that's through a number of different factors. So we're seeing diversity in the types of workers that we have in our workforce. So we've got a huge growth in contingent workers, with contractors and freelancers becoming mainstream in most organizations. And I'm now talking more and more to organizations around the use of gig economy and crowdsourcing to identify some of those core skills that they may not necessarily need to bring into their organization, but they need for a specific time or for a specific task. And how do they really augment that traditional workforce with those skills and capabilities? The challenge we're seeing around this is only around 8% of organizations have the technology and processes to manage this diverse workforce effectively. So really understanding how you can effectively manage through performance management, but also through talent management, where you're bringing in these skills and capabilities into the workforce is where organizations are really going to be able to drive advantage from this. The second area is all around the diversity in the nature of our careers. So with over 50% of those born in 2007 expected to live over 100, people are now planning for 5 careers in their lifetime. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to move organizations. So this could still be within manufacturing industry, it could still be within your organization. And we are seeing more so within the manufacturing industry, people tend to stay loyal to an organization, or at least stay loyal to an industry. But what they will see is the need to adapt and drive their own careers. So as their skills and capabilities and the requirements from their role is going to change, they're going to need to adapt in themselves, and therefore might change their career trajectory within your organization. So how do we as organisations support people through that? So how do we ensure that they have the right skills, the right capabilities, but also that they know what those future skills and capabilities are going to be? We did a Voice of the Workforce report a couple of years ago, and what came out of that was that individuals still expect organisations to tell them what skills and capabilities they're going to need in the future, to provide the training and to kind of facilitate that. So this idea of driving our own careers is only facilitated by the support of organisations. And finally, we're seeing huge generational diversity in our workforce. So there could be 4 to 5 generations and in a workforce, and for many of your organisations, it might even be 4 to 5 generations in the same family within your workforce. However, not everyone wants or is motivated equally by the same thing. This isn't to kind of drive that generational stereotype, but it is to understand that in order to effectively engage all of your employees, people are expecting this personalised experience. And those companies in the top quartile for employee experience are typically 25% more profitable than their competitors. So this actually isn't just nice to do, this drives real business benefit. So what does all that mean for organisations in manufacturing? So we think about this through 4 different lenses. Because future work can seem all-encompassing and can either be too large or might include challenges and opportunities that aren't relevant for your organisation, we look at it through 4 different lenses so people can really understand what is going to drive value within their organisation. The first is all around how work is delivered. So this is really understanding what the impact of disruption is on the tasks completed by the workforce, whether that be through automation, alternative talent sources, or through proximity. So thinking about things like offshoring, nearshoring, virtual working, which we've all been forced to adopt in recent times. The second is all around how business is organised. So really this concept of multidisciplinary networks of teams. So how do you understand what skills and capabilities you've got across your workforce and be able to bring them together in a team that can deliver an effective output. The third is all about how people experience work, so really understanding who's in your workforce, what motivates them, and how you can drive productivity and engagement of that workforce. And finally, how work is enabled. So if all this work is changing and the workforce is changing and is augmented by different technologies, what's the role of supporting functions in this? And how do they support an organisation in really driving the value for the future of work? And this shift is being felt in the manufacturing industry. So if you move on to the next slide, we can see that we're expecting a skills gap in manufacturing of 2.4 million positions unfilled between 2018 and 2028 due to the skills required. So this is really an important factor for manufacturing to start thinking about now as we start seeing that skills gap increase. If we move on to the following slide, we can start seeing what some of those roles in the future of manufacturing might look like. As I mentioned, the work's changing, it's augmented by technology, future skills and capabilities are changing. So what this means is that the roles people perform in the future will be changing and will be adapting. And you've got some of the future roles that we've identified on the screen in front of you. For those of you on the phone, we have things like digital twin engineer, predictive supply network analyst, a robot training coordinator, digital offering manager, drone data coordinator, and smart factory manager. These are all roles that we've identified where technology is going to disrupt quite significantly. We're going to need to change the skills and capabilities and create new roles to manage that effectively. The full paper of this is available, and I'm sure we can send it out for anyone who is interested. But when we've looked at these roles, we've really drilled down into the details around what we're seeing in terms of skills, capabilities, but also what it's like in in that role. So what's a day in the life for that person? What technology enables them to be successful? How do they interact with their team members, their leadership, and also with the technology that we've mentioned? And where might you find those talents? So are you now looking at different talent sources in order to fulfill these roles where you may not have gone to your recruitment pools traditionally? So it's all about rethinking who your talent are, where you get them from, and how you develop and retain them in an organisation. And I'm now going to hand back to Nick, because I think he's going to take us through the next section of our report.
Lauren, and thank you very much for that. Yes, so just moving on to the second group of themes. So these three themes are very specific to Smart Factory, as compared to the earlier four, of which they are a bit more general to any form of transformation, but obviously do have some nuances to the Smart Factory as well. So the first of these is around connectivity and data. So it's nearly every one of the Smart Factory transformations we've studied and we Deloitte have been involved with has had this challenge around connectivity. So how do we get the data, particularly from the physical world, from different machines, from people and from the systems, in a place that actually we can get the right data and it gets to the right people, machines and systems wherever they need it? So what's driving that challenge around connectivity? Well, some of it is simply the network connectivity. So concepts like Wi-Fi and cellular can be a huge challenge in a factory environment, given the labyrinth of steel, concrete structures and so on. And increasingly, we're seeing more and more interest in technologies such as 5G, different forms of mesh networking and so on to alleviate some of those challenges, so that we can actually connect in to these different data sources and drive that value. And on 5G, for example, we're seeing so much interest. We're now just launching ourselves a partnership around the West Midlands for a 5G test bed and accelerator to help those manufacturers who want to explore the use of that technology. But even having that connectivity and being able to physically get data, there's a problem around data management. And given there's a diverse types of time series data sources, data that's in ERP and so on, one of the things that our respondents talked a lot about was around how to harmonize that data and how increasingly they're looking at things like artificial intelligence tools to be able to understand how to mash together the different data sets so they can make sense of them as well. So that's connectivity. And connectivity is one aspect, but that can be really exacerbated by the sheer diversity of the technologies, devices, machines, and so on that exist in the factory environment. And diversity comes in a whole range of different forms. They'll be very familiar to many of you involved in manufacturing. So there is diversity in age, and it's not uncommon for even relatively modern factories to have assets which are decades old, whereas some may be state of the art. There's a wide range of data formats that I talked about. There's huge diversity in the data, different equipment from different OEMs, some assets which are documented, some which aren't, and the list really does go on. So I think for me, this is really an area where people can think differently. And I just wanted to mention a couple of different angles to that in terms of this way of dealing with some of that diversity on the shop floor. So the first is the example of a diesel engine manufacturer that's well known in the public domain, who looked to sensorize some of their diesel engines. But actually, rather than a kind of a high-cost option about advanced telematics and some telecommunication solutions and so on, they've introduced and been awarded an Edison Award for a smart cap, which is a low-cost telematics device. It's an oil cap filter that can go on any of their engines. It has a small vibration sensor in it and a Bluetooth connection for a phone, and provides huge amount of value about visibility, about run times of engines for their customers, without the significant costs that could come with otherwise trying to retrofit quite a sophisticated technology solution. So I think the scope for ingenuity in this space is significant as well. Another example would be around older pieces of equipment that you can imagine analog gauges are the only way to actually understand what's going on. And again, yes, there could be some high-tech answers to that. Another answer is to use what's now readily available in terms of technologies around image recognition and use of kind of different forms of cameras to read those gauges and digitize the output. So I have to say, the kind of the diversity of devices and so on, I think it does really spark the need and the opportunity for ingenuity around understanding how to address the diversity of equipment in the smart factory environments as well. The third headline from these smart factory specific themes is around managing the convergence of information technology and operational technology. So I'm going to hand over to John now, who's going to talk a little bit more about the topic, partly around cyber, but also around the broader worlds of bringing IT and OT together.
Thanks, Nick. Hi, everyone. I'm John Lamb, and I work with heavy industries to secure their operational technology. And these are industries where OT is core to their business. What this means is I've seen and helped organizations in manufacturing, oil and gas, and shipping tackle exactly what I'm going to talk to you today about. So we talk about convergence, but what do we mean? The Oxford English Dictionary defines convergence as moving towards a place from different directions and meeting. This is precisely what IT and OT have been doing for years. It means we can achieve more by doing things in ways that we couldn't do before. Let us together kind of explore what this convergence journey has looked like. I find it helps to think not only in terms of the information technology and the operational technology, but also in whether it's deployed locally or across the enterprise. If we look up till the 1990s, these domains were very much separate, but there were kind of early signs that these were starting to branch out from local instances to those more enterprise-wide. Moving towards 2010, there was a shift where we saw the infancy of this convergence. Where we are now and beyond is a trend where both of these worlds are becoming one. We will then just be talking about technology. But this journey itself has been challenging. Nick mentioned the MAPI survey, and 27% of respondents said that this was a major challenge to their smart factory initiatives. Why has this been? Well, these two worlds differ, and so do the primary people that manage them. They come from different backgrounds, they work with different vendors, and they deal with different concerns. The key is finding ways to bring these two worlds, these two types of people together.
And John, what do you think are some of the practical steps to bring those audiences together?
Well, nothing brings people together more than a crisis, and I think that's been shown by recent events where lots of people have come together, not in a physical sense, but in terms of supporting people. So what I find is running cybersecurity tabletop exercises is good for this. It allows people to understand what some of those differences of approaches are, but everyone's working towards that common shared goal. I've kind of run some of these, and you get some quite interesting views about whether you bring systems back up quickly and fast to kind of minimize the impact and downtime, but then you also risk that there's a wider impact to the systems, that they may be kind of reinfected or the cause of that incident may not be over. Should we go to the next slide? So let us imagine what a smart factory looks like, where this OT and IT divide has been bridged. What typical applications of this connectivity would we see? Some of these typical connectivity that we'd see in this environment is we would have links to the corporate offices to analyze efficiencies and identify areas of optimization. We'd see more links to third parties for remote access for maintenance purposes. We'd possibly see more IoT devices in warehouse operations and greater automation and control systems for robotic arms. There would be better integration along your supply chain to better meet kind of supply and demand by directly querying each other's systems. All of this relies on enormous amounts of data that can be shared and leveraged in real time. This all requires careful planning to properly integrate. Without this, the implication is greater exposure and risk. It could cause a plant to shut down or a safety incident leading to injury or loss of life. We need to consider how we ensure remote users are who they say they are and can only access what they need and can only do what they say they will do. For IoT devices, the security varies, and it was once described to me as trying to protect against all the bad in the world on a device costing a few dollars. As for automation equipment, they have lifespans of 20 to 30 years, where security patching isn't always possible. So how real is the threat to manufacturing? Next slide, please. The threat is evolving in terms of complexity, tactics, and sheer numbers. Over a 6-month period in 2019, they doubled. Attackers are upping their game, and they only need to be lucky once. You may be forgiven for thinking that this only affects IT. However, operational environments are being targeted. 90% of companies asked reported at least one security incident in the last 2 years. And what has been one of the main causes of this? 97% of respondents say their security challenges were the direct result of these IT-OT convergence efforts. What we're finding is businesses of all shapes and sizes are being impacted. The NotPetya ransomware hit Maersk in 2017. This came in via their supply chain. Officially, it severely affected their global operations for 10 days. However, the effects were being felt many months after. Last year, Lokagoga hit the aluminium producer Norsk Hydro. It forced them to disconnect their plants and run in manual mode. This was so much more less efficient than how they normally operate. And this costed them an estimated 52 million in damages, and they are still recovering today. These events serve as a wake-up call. However, 1 in 4 manufacturers are still not performing regular risk assessments and lack the visibility of the risks that they face. In essence, this greater connectivity is introducing unmanaged vulnerabilities if not handled properly. With all of this, where do you start? Ask yourself this question. Do you know what is critical to your business? If the answer is no, it's even more difficult to tackle the problem. The good news is it's not too late, and now is the time to build security into your future plans. It costs 30 times more to retrospectively fix issues than to design them in from the very beginning. When it comes to cybersecurity, it can feel like you're drowning in a sea of risk. It is far too easy to simply target the low-hanging fruit, deploy some tactical solutions, and feel like you're making a real difference. In reality, you've locked the front door, but left the window wide open. Instead, what we do is we use some simple concepts to look at the issue from a more strategic perspective. The first is the pyramid on the left. By looking at the impact, you can easily prioritize the areas that you must protect and the areas that, if there was a compromise, would only cause a minor inconvenience. The second concept is the bow tie model, which those from an engineering background will be familiar with this. It's a great way to model threats and consequences of an incident. Take, for example, a fire. The threat may be smokers or combustible chemicals. The preventative controls in place are the use of fireproof materials and operating in well-ventilated areas. However, fire still occurs. So to react to this, you need smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, and even fire marshals to limit the impact. This same concept can be applied to cybersecurity to provide defense in depth and cover that whole range. A balanced approach is essential in the light of growing IT and OT integration. Next slide. Bridging this divide needs to be a business-focused change initiative. Yes, technology is involved, but this is only to enable the business to do what it needs to do. There are 4 things you need to do to achieve this. 1. As with all successful change initiatives, it starts at the top. Early buy-in from executive IT and OT stakeholders ensure that you have the right support, and this can also save you a lot of pain along the way. Please, please, please don't let this be the reason that it fails in your organization. We regularly conduct CISO labs, so have real insight on how to make the message stick. The second, understand both the long-term risks and the benefits of digitalization in your operations. You need to be able to have an open mind and be open and honest and debate about the pros and cons. The third, foster a culture of collaboration between your different stakeholders. This is key to bridging the worlds of IT and OT. By fostering this collaborative culture, you can bring those 2 sides and towards a common goal. The fourth, identify your critical processes and systems and prioritize your security efforts and capabilities. You won't be able to secure everything, so start with what is most important to you first. If you do those 4 things, it will make bridging that divide a lot easier. Thank you, everyone. Handing back over to you, Nick.
Thank you, John. Thank you. So there's a brief run through the top themes identified from this latest research exercise from leading organisations that have been focused on their smart factory journeys. I expect at least some of these will resonate with many of you, but the research paper does provide more insight, and I would genuinely be really interested to understand perspectives and challenges over the coming days and weeks, and we'll share some contact details shortly as well. Now, I mentioned earlier the importance of leadership engagement as part of that kind of top-down, bottom-up philosophy to change management around these smart factory transformations. And the theme of seeing is believing. Now, we at Deloitte have partnerships with a number of global research centres that could be invaluable for those embarking on their own smart factory journeys across the world. Our innovation centres are centred around the State University of Wichita in the US, our smart factory in Düsseldorf, Germany, and here in the UK, we're working closely with the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre in Sheffield. We also have plans to activate further centres in the Asia Pacific region in the coming months as well. As I say, here in the UK, we're partnering with the AMRC. I mentioned at the outset of the webinar that we had hoped to be able to host this event there as part of that seeing is believing experience, and we will look at being able to host future events when the time is right. And we are also collaborating with the AMRC and helping businesses to jumpstart and accelerate their smart manufacturing, smart factory journeys as well. So if you've got any questions or would like to explore how we might help, then just let us know. So we are left with nearly 15 minutes for questions. So I know Kay is now opening up the chat box on the Skype for those who'd like to ask any questions. Just while we see what there is out there, I may have just put Lauren and John on the spot here with a question each. So perhaps if we could start, Lauren, with a question for you. What do you think are the future skills that are needed to deliver smart factory transformations?
I think with this, it's what we're seeing pretty much across different industries in terms of the mix of skills that people are going to need. So where traditionally people have been very much focused on those technical skills, we're going to now need people to adapt and have a mix of both technical and business skills. For manufacturing, what we're really seeing this is in terms of having that technical knowledge, but mixing that with digital skills. So the ability to use digital technology to access data, to understand what that data is telling them, and to be able to make data-driven decisions. But then also having critical thinking, so really having those problem-solving skills, which will enable people to use the information that they're getting from technology and make decisions effectively. And then we're also seeing, as we saw from some of those roles that I presented earlier, people are going to start needing some of those programming skills for robotics and automation. So there are going to continue to be more specialist skills that people are going to need that are going to be different from those today. It's all around that idea of adaptability and resilience to enable people to understand what those future skills are and understand that they're going to have to continue to evolve their skills as their career develops.
Okay, thank you. I guess one for you, John. I heard some of the thinking there around IT/OT integration, and also some of your thoughts about how to bring some of those communities and concepts together. What else is there?
Yeah, so I mean, some of the other things that you can do is map out what those critical business processes are. This sounds like something that all organizations should already have, but you'll be very surprised that people don't. So finding out where how those systems interact with each other, what stakeholders are involved, and what some of those stumbling blocks could be. I find it's really good to kind of pull multiple people from all over the organization. So not just IT and OT, people from operations, people from HR, to really kind of understand how the whole business works and how it all hangs together. And I think it's really important to understand clearly what those interactions are before you start connecting things up. And one more kind of word of warning is quite a lot of the time in these environments, you could have kind of test links and to kind of try out new connections and new applications. However, quite a lot of times these test links suddenly become business critical and they suddenly become normal. However, they haven't necessarily been designed with security in mind.
Great, thank you, John. Now, there are a couple of questions coming in. I'll take the first one, which is a question around the. Let's see. So the question is the COVID-19 pandemic accelerating certain use cases? So I mentioned at the outset that personally I'm working with various different organisations around responses to help the frontline healthcare organisations, and there are two immediate examples of digital concepts which I think come into play. The first is additive manufacturing, and there is significant interest and progress, I think, on producing components at the very least for things like ventilators, but also areas such as parts of personal protective equipment, including things like face shields, and I think very excitingly the potential production of swabs as part of testing kits as well. So that I think a lot's going into those, both in terms of the organisations, the OEMs for printers, but also healthcare institutions themselves, and some of the research centres, including the ones I've mentioned during the course of this webinar as well. The other one that comes to mind immediately is around support for remote working. So clearly, we are needing to sustain manufacturing operations in a world of social distancing and so on. I will mention, one particular alliance, and there are others of ours, but PTC have made available some of their technology to enable remote working at no cost through to the end of June, and that is a supporting technology for specialists to coordinate with others in the workforce as well. So I mean, those are just a couple. And the second part of that question is around, has there been a focus on purpose before profits to help address the issues from a social responsibility standpoint? Again, personal experience, absolutely yes. I mean, there are, obviously commercial tensions in some of this, but overwhelmingly, my own personal experience over the past couple of weeks in particular has been a real camaraderie in healthcare institutions, manufacturers, to do the right thing, and in some cases making sharing IP that may not otherwise be shared, things like designs and so on, and a degree of collaboration between what might naturally be competitors for the greater good. So I think on that question, my personal experience is absolutely yes.
Just to kind of add on to what you were saying then, Nick, we've been talking about kind of this idea of purpose before profits for some time in Future of Work, and been talking to different organisations around using their ecosystem and being able to come together for that common purpose. And there was a couple of weeks ago an article in the FT actually around how COVID-19 has actually progressed Future of Work by about 10 years in a short space of time, because people have been forced to use technology to do virtual working and all that kind of thing. But that concept that we are kind of social beings and we have a social conscience, if you like, has really driven that almost expectations of organizations to kind of do the right thing in this situation. So it's definitely pushed and advanced from a Future of Work perspective very rapidly.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think great point, Lauren. And another question that's coming is, what do you see as the biggest stumbling block that manufacturers are facing while implementing smart factory concepts? In my experience, a great question. I think I call out a couple of things. The first is the value case, and constructing a business case that stands up to scrutiny. So there's a world of stuff that you could do, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those things should be what you do, and whether they're going to provide ROI. And I do say ROI depending on the objective you're trying to deliver on. ROI is obviously one thing. Clearly, there are other levers to be pulled around smart factory, around things like health and safety, in particular as well. But constructing that case, I think, is a challenge. I think that's where some of the seeing is believing does come into play. More and more, we are seeing organisations want to actually kind of look, touch and feel what it is that others are doing to get that confidence that this isn't just hyperbole and good warm talk around the value that you can derive from smart factory transformations. I think the other aspect as well is the inherent balance between providing flexibility for example, individual plants to innovate, come up with their local solutions that will have high degrees of adoption, and balancing that with more of a top-down construction that would otherwise kind of reduce effort. And I think striking that balance, I think, is an important thing as well. And what I've seen working in that place are, just ways of kind of better communicating across the organisation what's going on at a grassroots level, so there's greater visibility, and establishing centres of excellence where some of the leading lights in an organisation around particular domains of digital or solutions that are being sold, they become centres of excellence for helping to propagate those kind of solutions and value elsewhere in the organisation as well. And I'm very happy to share some other thoughts on those couple of topics offline as well. So we've got another one, I think, on IT, OT, John, if we could. So the question is, John, OT is still a fairly fragmented market. Which vendors do you see as the future leaders in IT, OT integration? It's probably fair to say it's difficult to have the crystal ball, John, but do you have some thoughts on maybe the characteristics of those organisations at least?
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to kind of tackle it, because I must admit some of the kind of bigger vendors out there, they are doing things in this IT and OT integration field, but I think quite a lot of times they are kind of constrained to their own particular solutions and their way of thinking. So I think someone to look at are those integrators where they are kind of solution agnostic. Yes, there are some some pros with working with vendors who know. We're working some integrators that know vendors particularly well. But I really do think it's finding those ones that can work with a variety of them.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. There is one final question, and we are running lowish on time now, but there was one question which is around commenting further around bringing the agile fail-fast approach into the operations and safety critical environment challenges and solutions. The individual asked the question, very happy to pick up offline as well. I mean, I think an immediate thing is agile and fail-fast can be an approach. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. I think key to it is the joint working, bringing the diverse teams together, so that you put failure in the context of what it is. So failure may be not demonstrating the commercial value in some sense, but certainly that diverse team needs to consider, a scenario where actually failure cannot be something that arises, causes some sort of safety critical issue or a hazard to life or whatever it happens to be as well. Thank you for those questions. So great questions there. So really do appreciate that. For those that either have further questions or those who have asked questions and would like to dig a little bit deeper, then please do just reach out to any one of Lauren, John, or myself. We'll be sharing the link to the Implementing the Smart Factory report over the next couple of days, and so I'll leave it as a thank you very much for all dialing in today. I hope you've all taken some value from what we've shared with you. As I say, John, Lauren, and I would be delighted to connect, whether it's on LinkedIn and hopefully in person if we run future physical events along with our partners such as the AMRC. So I will wrap things up there. So all stay very safe and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thanks very much.